Does that seem to help now? I restarted the stream, so if all those who are still here. There we go again, I know. Alright, so I'm going to restart this like nothing happened. Now we hear it. Good. So, guys, this is episode 13 of Play Ball. We're here at Battle Creek, Michigan, and we're going to take the brand new Aviat Husky for the trip. This is based off the iconic Piper Super Cub made by Aviat Aircraft in Wyoming. Now, this just released in the marketplace by Asobo on August 3rd. And we're going to take this bad boy out for a nice flight right now. I apologize for the earlier stream issues, but I'm glad that you all can hear me. I really appreciate it. Thank you. I'm just glad we got this thing issue helped out. So we're going to go ahead and take off back again. I'm going to at least try to get to 2,000 feet. But yeah, this is a beautiful plane. So for you guys who don't really know, this is actually going to be my first ever stream that I'm now a Twitch affiliate. So I finally got it back on Monday. So now the question is where we're going to go first. Well, the first thing we're going to go first is Kalamazoo, Michigan. Now, Kalamazoo is located in the southwest corner of Michigan. It's equidistant in distance to Chicago and Detroit. And one of the most notable features about the city of Kalamazoo is the outdoor mall, the Kalamazoo Mall, which is one of the few outdoor pedestrian malls in the United States. Now, those are more common in Europe. Now, some of the landmarks here include the Kalamazoo Valley Museum, the Kalamazoo Farmers Market, and Martin Glen County Park, which is one of the city parks. Also, Western Michigan University is also from Kalamazoo. Now, some famous people in Kalamazoo include Dave Burns, Orville Gibson, and one of Kalamazoo's most famous people, Derek Jeter, the legendary baseball shortstop for the New York Yankees, is from the city. As well. Now, for those who don't know about Orville Gibson, he's actually the founder of the Gibson Guitar Company, and the Gibson Guitars has some of the most famous musicians and guitarists of all time. And those players included Elvis Presley. They include legends Jim Page, some of the most. And there's tons of Gibson players out there. So many iconic guitarists and players. Eric Clapton's used them. Just so many people use Gibson guitars right here in Kalamazoo. I need to head back to the right course. Apologies. Now, the reason we're heading to Chicago today is because we got the Cubs and White Sox today, the two major league teams on there as well. I just brought up the normal husky because, but maybe I might want to take it for the next leg. So I'm going to switch out between different husky models each leg. Or I guess on the first leg I'll take the normal husky for leg 1, and then the next 2 legs I might take the floats variant, just to show you some of the different variants of the husky. As well. So I'm going to set this to high level clouds. I'm going to try some different weather. This thing can go quite fast for a bush plane. Yeah, what a beautiful bird. What a beautiful plane. Good to see you who's all in the chat. Are you glad you guys can hear this pretty well? Okay. So we're going to be flying around our first waypoint, which is going to be Sutherland Park. And that's home to the Kalamazoo Growlers, and I believe they're an independent baseball team. Yep, they play in the Northwoods League, which is a collegiate baseball league. Basically, we'll be visiting that stadium soon. I will regret using a bush plane when it comes to landing. It takes practice, Martel, to land a bush plane. I guess there's 2 ways you can land a bush plane. You can land it with the 2 front wheels, which goes faster, but you're gonna have to be a bit careful with the rudders and stuff. Or you can actually go out with a stall and do a 3-point landing. You have to land at the lowest possible speed, but if you land like this, you can land pretty short. The Husky really prides itself for being a really good short takeoff and landing plane. However, I wish that was better reflected in the sim, because in real life, the Husky is actually a really good short takeoff and landing machine. It's extremely capable in that. I usually do a prop strike. That happens. That usually happens when you press the brake. What you need to try to do is when you land, pull it a little bit back while you brake. That way you can counteract the brake force, and that will be the best way to avoid prop strike. It's all about practice. I think the best way is to go on a small go onto an airfield you're comfortable with, and just practice your landings. Just keep practicing. That's the key to land a bush plane. It takes a lot of practice to land a tail dragger. That's how I do, and that's why I'm pretty good about landing these things. It's all about getting comfortable. That's what I believe in. Yep, don't be afraid to try that out, Martel. I think that really is going to be really helpful for you. So yes, I do have a Discord if anyone wants to visit. I do actually have a Discord here today. I do have a Discord for anyone that's interested in joining, who wants to get updates to whenever I stream. Then once we visit the Growlers Ballpark, we'll then make a visit to Western Michigan University in Kalamazoo. The Western Michigan University Broncos. We'll be taking a visit to them. It's beautiful here in Michigan. Basically, we're flying around where Colonel Fork is around, Kalamazoo Battle Creek. Apparently, he lives right around the area. we're gonna go ahead and put this showcase. Yeah, I love this plane. I love the Husky. I know some people think it's a Cub ripoff, but but for me, who's know about bush planes, the difference between a Cub and a normal Cub and a Husky is very different. Like they have different engines. Sometimes they have different landing gear systems, like wheels. There is difference between a Cub and a Husky. The Husky is much heavier than the Savage Cub. But yeah, I would love to do some of my own bush flying with this thing. Just take it to places where it should go. Unfortunately, Kalamazoo is not photogrammetried really well in the sim. I'm going to go back to the cockpit. I don't usually turn it this wide. There's the Growler's ballpark to our left. It's right here. So once, there it is. Martel. I'm on the East USA server. You're more than welcome to join me. In fact, I think having more people join me is really good. I mean, these are all group flights, so anyone's welcome as long as they pick GA. I am more than happy to have any one of you join me. I'm more than happy to. So this here is Western Michigan University in front of me. WMU, home of the Broncos. There she is, Kalamazoo High School. There's the main university campus down below. Now we're going to turn back to 223 degrees. We're going to turn back into there. And I'm going to go ahead and get ready for the next part of the slideshow for a bit. So I'm going to go ahead and get to the next slideshow. I saw you take it off, but lost you. I know, the servers have had a lot of issues, Martel. Apparently, people keep disappearing off the servers, which is kind of weird. That's something a lot of people have noticed. Murph has noticed it. Allison Johnson's noticed it. Colonel Forks knows about this issue. A lot of people I know have this problem. I'm hoping it gets fixed in the next World Update. But, I mean, I'll just have to wait and see. But now we get to one of the two major things I want to talk about in the slideshow. And this is one of the two baseball teams in Chicago. This is one of the teams. This is the National League team in Chicago. The Chicago Cubs, one of the most popular teams in all Major League Baseball. The Chicago Cubs were actually established all the way back in 1876 as the White Stockings, but have changed their name back to the Cubs in 1903, and are one of the two remaining charter franchises remaining in the National League. The other one being the Atlanta Braves. In their history, the Chicago Cubs have won 3 World Series championships in 1907, 1908, and 2016. They have won 17 National League pennants and 8 division titles. And they currently play at Wrigley Field, which has been their home since 1916, making it the second oldest ballpark in the major leagues behind Fenway. And obviously, like a lot of other teams, the Cubs wear red, white, and blue as their team colors. Now, one of the nicknames given to the Cubs is they are called the Northsiders because they belong on the north side of Chicago. And it's within the city of Chicago. Now, the White Sox, the other team for the American League, they're called the Southsiders because they play on the south side of Chicago. It's just like the New York Yankees play at the Bronx and the Mets play at Queens. It references the location within the greater city. Now, the Cubs' history go all the way back to 1870, but they joined the National League as the Chicago White Stockings. And they quickly became one of the most well-established and one of the top teams of the National League as they won the league's first ever pennant back in 1876. After back-to-back pennants in 1880 and 1881, Hobart, the owner of the original team, passed away, and Spalding actually became the ownership of the team. And Spalding actually is really interesting because he founded his own sporting goods company called Spalding Sporting Goods. And he found that company, and they do lots of sporting equipment and gear, which is really cool and interesting. And thanks to his leadership and ownership, they captured their third straight pennant in 1882 and won 2 additional pennants in 1885 and 1886 with the help of one of baseball's first ever superstars, Cap Anson. I think I'm supposed to say Cap Anson. So basically, the 1880s were a really dominant time for the Cubs as one of the most dominant teams. Eventually, in 1902, Spalding actually boasted his roster and sold the team to John Hart. And John Hart actually renamed the team to the Chicago Cubs. And the origin of the Chicago Cubs names is actually interesting. You see, in the early 1900s, there was a franchise called the Chicago Bears. And basically, and of course it wasn't officially named the Cubs until the 1907 season. And during that time, the Cubs were absolutely dominant in the National League in the 1900s. From 1905 to 1912, with Frank Chance as player manager, they won 4 National League pennants, and they actually got 2 World Series championships in 1907 and 1908. Those 2 are important because those would be the 2 World Series they won before 2016. But the Cubs were absolutely dominant as well. In 1914, Albert Lanskin bought shares of the franchise, and before 1916, he actually owned the franchise now. And by doing this, the Cubs won the pennant in 1918, but they lost to the Red Sox in that 1918 World Series to Babe Ruth's Red Sox. And if anyone who's checked out my Boston episode would probably say that 1918 was the last time they won it, the Curse of the Bambino. Pretty interesting as well. Beginning in 1916, Bill Wrigley, who owned his own chewing gum company, he's a chewing gum magnate, he actually bought more stock of the Cub, and by 1921, he was the majority owner of the team. Bill Wrigley also was one of the people who was in Catalina Island. I know this from Murph's Stream when he flew to Catalina. Bill Wrigley even has his own name of the stadium, too, named after him. Near the end of the first decade, under the guidance of the 2 owners, the Cubs won the National League pennant in 1929, and eventually they had a really weird feat. They won a pennant every 3 years, as they won pennants in 32, 1935, and 1938. But in all of those, they never won a championship. 1932, most notably, was Babe Ruth's called shot as they faced the Yankees, but because of Cubs tradition, they kept losing. Then the Cubs enjoyed one more pennant in 1945 by going 98 and 56, but they lost to the Detroit Tigers in that World Series. Now, something interesting about the 1945 series, and this has to go back to actually the curse of the Billy Goat. Now that curse has actually got a really interesting history. So the story goes that one of the fans, it was by actually an owner of the Billy Goat Tavern named William Sionis, and apparently he brought his pet goat Murphy to Game 4 of the 1945 World Series, and apparently he was forced to be kicked out of the stadium, and he actually allegedly declared, them Cubs, they ain't gonna win anymore, and because of this, the Cubs haven't won a pennant in a World Series since the day of the Billy Goat. So this is a really interesting story about a curse. that's actually happened. And apparently, due to this, the Cubs only went out one winning season from 1947 to 1966, which is just rough for the Cubs. Yes, the Cubs have not done well. They've always been overshadowed by their rival, the Cardinals. And one of the most interesting was in '64. They traded Emilio Broggio. They traded Lou Brock to Emilio Broggio of the Cardinals during that time, and that ended up being really bad for the Cubs. It became one of the most lopsided trades in history. It's really, really rough. But that didn't mean they didn't have good players. As Ernie Banks was really good, Ron Santo was good, Ferguson Jenkins, Billy Williams, all good players that played during those bad Cubs teams. But the Cubs just failed to have winning seasons, unfortunately. It's just rough for the Cubs. However, the late 1960s brought hope to the franchise, as after losing 103 games in 1966, they actually got 2 straight winning seasons in 67 and 68. And by 1969, the Cubs were actually looking like to become a division winner in the playoffs. But unfortunately, that did not happen, as the Cubs suffered one of the worst regular season collapses ever, as the Cubs could not manage to break off. And apparently, because they struggled late in the season, they absolutely struggled versus the New York Mets, who won the division, and they later on won the World Series as the Miracle Mets. It's kind of a weird thing to go on, but yeah, that actually happened. In fall of the 1969 season, the Cubs actually have been very competitive. They post winning seasons for the next few seasons, but with no playoff action, just due to the fact there was just so much competition in the divisions. In 1977, the team found some new life, but the Cubs absolutely collapsed, as they were 19 wins, about 500, but they went 20 and 40 to finish 4th in the division back in 1977, which is rough. Poor Cubs fans, just so much struggles. Just poor Cubs fans, it's just rough. After a dozen more subpar seasons, in 1981, the Cubs actually hired Dallas Green from the Phillies, and he actually was tasked to turn that franchise around. And they got a few more pieces, but the most notable piece was Ryne Sandberg, who came in from the Phillies, and he became one of the major stars of the team. And thanks to him, the Cubs won their very first ever division championship and their first playoff appearance since 1945. Because Ryne Sandberg being the legend he is, he actually won his first ever MVP. But despite the effort, they managed to be shocked by the San Diego Padres in the NLCS, preventing them from going back to the World Series. In 1985, the next year, there were high hopes, but the problem was the Cubs just couldn't find a way to win, and injuries really took a toll on that 85 team. In 1989 was the first full season with night baseball in Wrigley Field, and yes, it took them all the way to 1988 to actually install lights at the stadium. I'm not kidding. The Cubs won the National League East. However, unfortunately for them, their issues with the bullpen really cost them another pennant against the Giants. And those Giants later on lost the World Series to the Oakland Athletics. Which is poor Giants. Just very, very rough time for the Cubs. We're going to be seeing lots of disappointments. 1988, now the Cubs were competitive through the 90s, but they weren't really that notable. The 1998 season, however, was one of the most interesting years in Chicago Cubs history. At the beginning of the season, they actually went on somber notes when legendary broadcaster Harry Caray just passed away. And for those who don't know about Harry Caray, he is one of the most beloved broadcasters in Major League Baseball history, and he's been the voice of the Cubs. And if anyone gets a chance, in fact, I might I may want to talk about legendary broadcasters at some point in my stream. I definitely want to put a mention to Harry Caray. However, things became a lot more interesting as 1980 was the year of the home run chase. And basically, it was between Sammy Sosa of the Cubs and Mark McGwire of the St. Louis Cardinals, and both of them try to break the home run record. However, of the two, Mark McGwire actually won as he hit 70 in 1998, while Sammy Sosa hit 66. I mean, but it was absolutely crazy. I mean, it was just nuts. It was crazy. Just crazy, crazy baseball. And the Cubs actually managed to get into the playoffs after a one-game playoff. With that, the Cubs finally make it back to the playoffs for the first time since '89. However, they fell to their division rivals, the Cardinals. And after a disappointing 2001-2 season, the Cubs absolutely dominated the National League Central. And they actually managed to defeat the Braves for their first postseason series win, get this, since 1908. Yes, it took them almost 100 years to win their first playoff appearance. However, unfortunately, the NLCS was quite interesting. So in Game 6 of the NLCS in 2003, apparently one of the most infamous moments in Cubs history happened. It is called the Steve Bartman incident. And for those that, and someone who's new to Cubs history, now in Game 6, when Chicago was leading 3-0, Luis Castillo actually hit a ball that is in the left field territory, foul territory of Wrigley Field. Moises Alou tried to catch it, but a fan named Steve Bartman reached it, but he deflected it, and it disrupted his catch. And had Alou caught it, it would have been 4 outs away for the Cubs from winning the pennant, and they could have made it to the World Series back in 2003. Unfortunately, that did not, because of this incident, though. Apparently, the Cubs were cursed and eventually allowed 8 runs in that inning, and they lost the game 8-3. And then they got eliminated in Game 7 to the Florida Marlins, and this became ironic considering that meant now Florida was going to go to the World Series, and they beat the Yankees in that series, which is really unfortunate for the Cubs. It just seems like the Cubs were cursed. Just really rough for the Chicago Cubs fans. However, things are about to get better. In 2007-8, the Cubs won the National League Central, but they lost in both times in the National League Division Series to the Diamondbacks and Dodgers in back-to-back years. After a new family bought the franchise, the Ricketts, the Cubs went a bit in decline, but they started to rebuild with pieces like Kris Bryant, Anthony Rizzo, and more. The Cubs all brought in the final piece of the team. They need to bring in a manager. What better manager to bring to a team that has won a World Series? By bringing one of baseball's worst franchises to greatness in Joe Maddon, who brought the Rays to greatness. And they actually returned to the playoffs back in 2015, and they went all the way to the championship series, but they fell to the New York Mets, who made the World Series that year, only to lose to the Royals. But 2016, oh boy. What a year this was, to say the least. They finished with the best record of baseball, and they finished with over 100 wins. They won 103 games that year. They won 103-59. To give them the best record since 1935. The Cubs managed to defeat the Giants in that series, and they actually managed to upset the Dodgers in the championship series, bringing home World Series baseball to Chicago for the first time since 1945. And then they also did something even better. They had one of the best World Series of all time. The 2016 World Series was one of the greatest World Series of all time, and it was between two franchises that haven't won championships in a long time. But in the end, the Cubs finally, at long last, break the curse of the Billy Goat to get their third World Series championship in franchise history. The Cubbies are finally champions once again. 108 years has finally been over. I mean, to think about what happened in 1908 when the last time the Cubs won the World Series, people were still drawing horse and carriages during that time. The first planes were biplanes. They weren't these awesome bush planes. Just stuff like that. I think that's really interesting to point out. Now, for the Cubs legends. Despite being historically been associated with futility, the Cubs have actually had some good players. The first one I want to mention is a guy named Cap Anson. Now, for those that don't know, Cap Anson was one of baseball's first superstars, and he played 27 seasons of professional baseball. And not only was he one of the best players of his era, but he was one of baseball's first superstars. He led the franchise to 6 National League pennants in the 1880s. Yes, he had 6 of them. And was likely to be the first player in Major League history to have 3,000 hits for his career. However, that's kind of disputed depending on who you ask, because some historians say he had 995 hits. Other historians say he had up to 2,435 hits. So that's why he was a 334 hitter in his long illustrious career, 97 home runs, but home runs weren't really that important back in the day. Average was much more important. And he had over 2,075 RBIs, which is a lot. He was twice the National League batting champion, and he was 8 times the National League RBI leaders. Over 100 years after his retirement, he still holds several Cubs records, even after 100 years. That just tells you how good he was in baseball. However, there is a silver line to all this. While Cap Anson brought popularity to the game, his most important contribution wasn't a good thing. It was the fact he actually helped bring in Major League Baseball's color barrier by establishing racial segregation of the game. He was one of the most influential people to bring about this. Now, back in the day, there wasn't any rules to segregate people based on race. Back in the day. However, apparently, he walked out on a team that featured a black player and and due to his racial intolerance, brought racial segregation to the game. Eventually, this would force the black baseball players to establish their own leagues, the Negro Leagues. And that happened all the way until 1947 when Jackie Robinson broke the color barrier. Now, usually you would think I do a lot of good things, but I will be more than happy to illustrate what the bad things happen. And I judge people based on their actions, and I think he kind of hurt the game in the long run. It took him a long time for baseball to finally be inclusive to everyone. So that's why I wanted to know why I put him on the list. Not just because he's a player, but also because of his influence. Both good and bad. Now, Frank Chance, definitely one of the most influential figures of the 1900s for the Cubs. He was known for his leadership abilities, and he was nicknamed the Peerless Leader. He is the all-time leader in managerial winning percentage in Chicago Cubs history. It was crucial for the Cubs' dominance of the 1900s. He was a .296 hitter with 596 RBIs, and he had 406 stolen bases. In addition to this, as a manager, he won 946 games with 648 losses, and he had 2 World Series championships back in 1907 and 1908. But there is something else that he's known for as well, because it turned out that he was one of a great pair of infielders, with Joe Tinker and Johnny Evers, who are all 3 of them are in the Hall of Fame, by the way. They formed a strong double-big combination, which was immortalized as Tinkers to Evers to Chance in baseball's sad lexicon. And this was a very famous poem actually written by Franklin Pierce Adams. And let me give you a whole thing about the whole poem. Let me recite this. So here's how it says. These are the saddest of possible words. Tinkers to Evers to Chance. Trio of bear cubs and fleeter than birds. Tinkers and Evers and Chance, ruthlessly pricking our gonfalon bubble, making a giant hit into a double. Words that are heavy with nothing but trouble, Tinkers to Evers to Chance. And this poem became one of the most iconic things about baseball itself through much of the early parts. And it's still very popular even to this day. And I think this is something really funny about Frank Chance. Definitely a very notable name, that's for sure. The next one is Mr. Cub, probably one of the top Cubs of all time. And I'm talking about none other than Ernie Banks. Nicknamed Mr. Cub, Ernie Banks is known by many to be the greatest player and ambassador in franchise history. He was active during the in the Chicago community during and after his tenure with the Cubs. He's been really one of the most famous and beloved people in franchise history. He played all 19 seasons as a Chicago Cub. He was a .274 hitter. He had 2,583 hits, 512 home runs, and 1,336 RBIs, or runs batted in. He was a 14-time All-Star with the Chicago Cubs. He was twice the National League MVP. And he was also twice the National League home run and run batted in leader. And one of the most interesting things about Ernie Banks discovered, that off the field, he was actually the first black owner of a Ford company motorship back in 1967. Ernie Banks Ford on Chicago's South Side. Which is actually really interesting about Ernie Banks. Now, one more thing I do want to talk about Ernie Banks as well is that he was also awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom back in 2013. And he was named to the Baseball All-Century team in 1999, proving that he's one of the greatest in franchise history. Ron Santo is the next one, and he's the best third baseman in franchise history. Now, Ron Santo played for the majors from 1960 to 1974 as one of the best third basemen in Cubs history. He was a 9-time All-Star, a 5-time Gold Glover, with 342 home runs, 2,254 hits, and 1,311 RBIs. After his Cubs playing career was over, he became a member of their broadcasting team until 2010. And despite all the great success, he has been battling diabetes for his whole life since he was a teenager. And in fact, he hid this from the public until the year 1971. So yes, he was battling type 1 diabetes all the way since then, proving that even without debilitating injuries, he would become extremely successful. There's two more legends I want to talk about. This is Billy Williams. Now, Billy Williams is the best outfielder in franchise history. He's been in the Hall of Fame. And not only is he the member of the Cubs All-Century team, but he's also the finalist for the Major League Baseball All-Century team. And he's known for being extremely competitive, as he was a .290 hitter, he had 2,711 hits, 426 home runs, and 1,475 runs batted in. As a 6-time All-Star, he was actually appointed in the Hall of Fame in 2011, actually, as a member of the National Baseball Hall of Fame's 16-member Golden Era Committee. And he helps vote in future Hall of Famers as well. Definitely one of those iconic players in Cubs history. And there is one last Cubby I do want to mention. Ryne Sandberg. Now, Ryne Sandberg was traded to the Phillies back in 1981 and it ended up being one of the most lopsided trades ever. His combination of strong offense and defense made him a star for the team for the 80s and early 90s. He hit 2,386 hits, 282 home runs, and 1,061 RBIs. He was a 10-time All-Star, the 1984 National League MVP, a 9-time Gold Glover, and a 7-time Silver Slug Award winner. Basically, Ryne Sandberg can do almost everything. He can play defense, he can play offense, just a guy who could do nearly everything. And finally, his career game was in 1984 on June 23rd, and became known as the Ryne Sandberg game, one of the most iconic games in franchise history. And such. And that's going to bring us to, I actually ended up being in the wrong direction. I need to head back to South Bend. I got lost. I was trying to focus on getting me my presentation and such. So I hope this information proved to be quite useful for you all. I think that's my general information on the Cubs. There's been a lot of history about the franchise. There's been a lot of history about the Cubs. For a franchise that's been around for 100 years, I try to do my best to give you the general information about the franchise. If I really wanted to go detail, it would take far too long, and I don't want to do that. So I'm heading back down to South Bend. Now let me pull up South Bend, Indiana for you. So for the guys that don't know, South Bend is located on the St. Joseph River. It is the 4th largest city in Indiana. All ones probably bigger are Indianapolis, Kokomo and Fort Wayne are the only ones bigger than South Bend, I believe. It was settled here in the 19th century by fur traders, and it was established in 1865, the same year as the end of the U.S. Civil War. River access allowed South Bend to grow, and one of the most famous companies that grew from there was Studebaker, making a whole bunch of automobiles and stuff back in the day. Now, the landmarks of South Bend include the University of Notre Dame, the Studebaker National Museum, and the Basilica of the Sacred Heart. And actually, we're going to be trying to fly to the University of Notre Dame as well. Now, notable people from South Bend, the Studebaker brothers, the ones who founded the Studebaker Automotive Company, are one of the famous citizens. John Wooden is one of the most famous basketball coaches of all time. And James Oliver, the one who founded the Plow Company. Those are famous South Benders. So we're going to be heading towards the University of Notre Dame soon enough. Now, if this was a college football stream, I would definitely have to make more mentions to the University of Notre Dame. It's quite the important university, if you ask me. It's especially iconic for being a 13th-time national champion in college football. And some of the greatest college football players of all time play at Notre Dame. So we're definitely going to make a flight to there. So there is Notre Dame ahead of me. So yes, I am super impressed with the performance here. Look at this, I'm getting 3-4 frames per second here in South Bend. I caught up. Hey, you caught up to me. Awesome. Hey, there you are. Found Jim Martell. So we're here at the University of Notre Dame. So there's the university ahead of me. So we're right here, around a few factory areas. There's Notre Dame. Here's Grace Hall. And here's the legendary football stadium down here, Notre Dame Stadium. 80,000 people. It's the largest football stadium in the state of Indiana. Some of college football's greatest legends play here. Apparently they were doing renovations. Now this temple right here, if you noticed, that is actually the Theodore M. Hesburgh Library. That's located up here in South Bend. And Notre Dame is known for its private academics as well. It is a private university, so academics play a major role at Notre Dame. So definitely a beautiful, beautiful big old stadium. Absolutely is huge. Yeah, Notre Dame. Gonna climb up for a bit. Now we're gonna find Four Winds Field. This is home to the single A affiliate of the Cubs. So we're just gonna lower the power. And I think the stadium's in front of us. Four Winds Field, home of the South Bend Cubs. Single A affiliate of the Chicago Cubs. nice small minor league park. Then we're going to go ahead and land at the airport. I think we can land at runway 27 left, 27 left. I think we're going to land there. Oh, you crashed. Oh, no. Hopefully you got slew. Oh, no. Hey, at least you're not Murph, who crashed the Husky a few times on Friday. Maybe I should have to teach you and Murph both how to bush fly. I'd probably teach you how to do this properly. Okay, I'm going to lower this. Now I'm going to put on the flaps. 2 stage of flaps. This should slow down the plane. Okay, got 2 stage flaps. See, I got the flaps down here. This plane is made for the short takeoffs and landings. Slowly lower the power. Okay, got that properly. Lower the power a bit. I'm going to tilt it upwards. And I'm down. Pull the flaps. Keep pushing the stick back. And I'm down. That easy. That easy. You have to watch to make sure you don't stall. Just try to land this slowly. Though there is another way you can land this. The other way let me get ahead and take off. There is one other way you can land this thing. Is this, if you got both flaps, you can land it like this. And land it like this. You can land it with the 2 wheels. Just kind of keep the balance, pull back once you get landed, and there you go. I just want to help people land tail draggers. Let me go ahead and get this thing parked. There she is. There's the beautiful Husky parked. Hey, the S-Cup, good choice. The S-Cup's a nice plane. I took it out during my trip through Colorado. It's a nice bush plane. Okay, okay, you're down. That's that's fine. Hey, you got it. Awesome. Good. That's wonderful. Good. Good. Wonderful. Yeah, tail draggers aren't the easiest planes to land. They're not as easy as the tricycle gear ones to land. But once you get the hang of practicing, I think that's the key. Hey, that's great. Just making sure anyone else here is around here. I guess I don't think anyone else is around here. So I'm going to go ahead and log in my flight. So let me go ahead and get our power. Turn off the mixture. And then just turn off the avionics. There we go. I locked my flight. Now I'm going to load back in. But I'm going to load back in with a different Husky this time. Hey, at least you survived. Yeah, that's the one thing. A lane that you can survive is a lane you can walk away from is a good thing. And it's okay. Sometimes people land, they do kind of bounce. So let me pull out the next world map for a bit. We're going to be taking off from South Bend. So for our next flight, so we're going to go ahead and get me the slideshow out. So the next location is going to be here in Michigan City, Indiana. Now, Michigan City is located in a region known as Michiana, which is part Indiana, part Michigan. It's located 50 miles east of Chicago and 40 miles west of South Bend. Now, some of the landmarks in that city include the Indiana Dunes National Park, Washington Park, and the Lighthouse and Pier, one of the only lighthouse still in Indiana, believe it or not. Some notable people include Ward Cunningham, Ann Baxter, and baseball pitcher Don Larson, who's most known for his perfect game in the 1956 World Series. Now, I wanted to bring you, however, I brought the Cub, but there's something different about this Cub. A normal Cub would have its head straight to the sky. Instead, it's more even, and it's because I brought this beauty out here. Yeah, this is the float plane. This is the Husky float plane. Look at this beauty. And I'm going to take this for the rest of the trip. Because we got water landings to do. And, beautiful water landings. Now, getting this started is similar to the normal Husky. But there is one difference, though. Free and collect. This one goes back to main. That's check. Now we're in ground, so we need to apply the brakes, which is check. Now we start the engine the same way, but there's also a unique thing for water too. It's beautiful. I know the Husky's amazing. I think it's my favorite bush plane to take so far. Like, I like all the bush planes. If I want to do a stall machine, I would take the I would take the Shock Ultra. If I want to take it for long-range cruising, I would take the X-Cub because it has autopilot. But for general, I like this thing a lot. And if I want a classic bush plane, I'd take the Savage Cub. But if I want a general all-around bush plane, I'd take this. This is good for most bush trips. Mixture's good. Alternate air source is closed. The master switch is on. Avionics is on. My radio's switched on. I set this to altimeter mode. Check on the transponder. Open the throttle. Clear it. Electric pump. Let it peak for a bit. It's got really nice. It can tell you what the peak is for fuel pressure. So it makes it a lot easier. Lean the mixture. get those two. Oil pressure check. Alternators on. Brakes must be released. 3 vision. And then I'm ready to take off. Now we're still going to run, we're going to take off at the same runway I landed. Runway 27 left. We're going to get back off the taxiway. Yeah, this amazing plane. You can get this beautiful plane. You can get it from the store for $15, which may seem like quite a bit, but considering there are planes similar to this for around like 20, 25 bucks, I don't know how much the Bird Dog is, but it's certainly cheaper than the Bird Dog, and you get multiple variants, including skis and big wheels as well. And it's got a nice set of avionics too. It's just a wonderful plane to fly. It's wonderful. I think if they could improve 1 or 2 things, this thing would be perfect. I would just buff up its speed a bit, make it go a bit faster, because I know in real life the cruise speed is like 120 knots, something like that, 110, 115 knots. If they do that, I think it would be near perfect. Well, careful. Don't tilt the plane over. Now, the thing I do want to be careful when you land this, there's some things I do want to talk about float planes. So, from what I learned about Forder, is you only use the wire rudders to land for taxiing. You do not use those for landing, or you're going to get those things torn up. And you need to land this with the bottom part right here. If you see the bottom part right here, you land with this. And you use the flaps for braking and landing. You don't really need to take them off for takeoff, unless you really want to. But it's just some general ground rules, and you're supposed to put the gear up when you land. It's just my protocols from what I remember when I learned about Forder. Forder helped me learn about a lot of this. So take off, pull off the bait, and now we'll get this bad boy taken off. And we're off. Press this, and I'm going to pull up the landing gear. Wait for Martel to get up. So there is now, I have misfortune again. Oh no, don't worry about it. It's okay. Things happen. Mistakes were made. now we gotta talk about the other baseball team for today, Chicago's other Major League Baseball team. We're gonna talk about the Chicago White Sox for a bit. Now, they were established in 1900 as one of the charter members of the American League, and now play in the American League Central Division. In their history, the White Sox, like the Cubs, have won 3 World Series: 1906, 1917, and 2005. 6 American League pennants, and 5 division championships between their time in the American League East and Central Divisions. They currently play at Guaranteed Rate Field, which is located on the south side of Chicago, and have previously played in the classic Comiskey Field. Their team colors are now black, silver, and white, which is unique. And their mascot name is Southpaw, which is actually a nickname people give to left-handed pitchers. Now, as a fun fact, the White Sox were originally known as the White Stockings, which is reference to the original name of the Chicago Cubs. Martell says you gotta go for dinner. Well, thank you for joining me, Martell, and flying along. I really appreciate it, and hope I see you next time. Now for the White Sox, things started back in 1901 as they were the inaugural champions of the American League back in 1901, just like the Chicago Cubs were the inaugural champions of the National League. The franchise made its first World Series appearance back in 1906 thanks to a player named Ed Walsh. They managed to defeat their crosstown rivals, the Cubs, to win their very first ever championship. To this day, they were known as the Hitless Wonders. The White Sox spent the next decade alternating between solid and mediocre seasons. In 1915, Pance Rowland was the manager of the team, and they acquired outfielders Shoeless Joe Jackson, Eddie Collins, and Happy Felsch to their lineup. The most notable of all of them is a guy named Shoeless Joe Jackson, and he's going to be important for the next part. With all those players, the White Sox roared through the American League in 1917 with 100 wins and 54 losses, which is still the franchise record for wins and winning percentage. And they not only won the pennant, they beat the New York Giants for their second straight World Series championship. However, 1919 was supposed to be a great year for the White Sox. They made it to the pennant and faced the Reds in the World Series. However, there is something controversial that happened during that time. I want to talk about one of baseball's first major scandals, and probably its most influential too. The infamous Black Sox scandal. I was waiting for the time to go to Chicago to talk about this. So in 1919, the White Sox won the American League pennant and faced the Reds in the World Series. In the best of 9, yes, they experimented with 9 games, not 7, the Reds won in 8 games. However, it was the off-the-field stuff that we gotta talk about. So apparently, there was a lot of issues with the players and Charles Comiskey. Apparently, Charles Comiskey was kind of a penny-pinching owner, and he didn't want to pay very much money for the players. And because of this, the players were really upset and formed their own meeting between them and a bunch of gamblers. And they decided to throw the World Series so the players can get paid more. Due to this, it made the White Sox throw the rest of the series away. In 1920, a year after the World Series, they led a grand jury led by Kennesaw Mountain Landis, and he indicted 8 players and 5 gamblers. And 1 year later, all 8 of them, including Shoeless Joe Jackson, one of the most notable ones, were banned from baseball. This scandal completely changed it. And apparently, it's because of how baseball run. And due to the incident, professional baseball needed a commissioner. So they actually appointed Kennesaw Mountain Landis to be its new commissioner. And as a result, he became baseball's first commissioner from 1920 all the way to 1944 was the commissioner of baseball. Now, the story about Shoeless Joe Jackson was when he was allowed to play baseball, he was one of the game's very best players. He was one of the best players in all of Major League Baseball during this time. And apparently, from what I've heard, depending on what stories, Shoeless Joe Jackson was supposedly be innocent. And some people think he wasn't even involved in it, but they still banned him. And to this day, Shoeless Joe Jackson's family and the museum have petitioned Major League Baseball to undo his ban, but that's never been happening. And that's happened Even as of 2015, they even did it. So it is a major deal for the White Sox, and it actually crippled them. It's a terrible incident. In fact, there's a whole movie and documentaries and stuff about the incident that goes into greater detail than what I'm mentioning. But it's something I do want to take a look at. Due to this thing, their roster was depleted, and thus the White Sox would not contend all the way to 1936. However, thanks to Jimmy Dykes, the White Sox finally became competitive again, who led them from 1934 to 1946. But they wouldn't be relevant to the 50s. And during the 1950s, the team restored its respectability, with players such as Manny Minoso, Nellie Fox, Luis Aparicio. They became known as the Go-Go White Sox, and they were incredibly successful. The only thing that held them back from winning a World Series or two was the New York Yankees, who, if you know, historically the Yankees are the most dominant team in baseball, as they were the runner-up 5 times between 1957 and 65. Just imagine if the Yankees were bad, the White Sox could have gotten a few World Series, because those two players are really good. However, in '59, they did manage to get a pennant, as they won their first pennant in 40 years. However, they lost to the Dodgers in that series, and they had to face Sandy Koufax, who is not a player you want to be pitching against. In the late 60s, the White Sox were threatened with relocations, but that never happens to Milwaukee. And Milwaukee's where actually we're going to go next week. We'll talk about that. The 1970 White Sox hit rock bottom for the franchise. And while they would have a resurgence in 1972, they would be overshadowed. However, 1983 was a great year for the White Sox, as they had their best success in a generation, as they won 99 wins. They won the American League East title. I need to change that. And they reached the American League Championship Series, but they lost to the Baltimore Orioles in the ALCS, who were later on win the World Series. But then for the rest of the 80s, they slid back to mediocrity. And the pitcher on there is Harold Baines, one of the star players of the era. However, things started getting much better for the team in the 90s. Their young talent helped them win 94 games, and 3 seasons later, they reached to the American League Championship Series, but only to lose to Toronto. However, the team maintained some sort of consistency in the 1990s, with guys like Frank Thomas and Ron Ventura. However, 2004, they hired potentially their final piece. Ozzie Guillen was named the manager, and the next year, they posted the best record in the American League and won their first ever American Central title. The 2005 White Sox are one of the best teams that no one ever talks about. People forget how good those 2005 White Sox were. They not only beat the defending champs in the divisional series, they absolutely crushed the Angels in the AL Championship Series to win their first pennant since 1959. And in the World Series, they absolutely crushed the Astros. They just swept them out of the door in the World Series to give them their first championship since 1917. The 2005 White Sox, the White Sox are so good people forgot about them because they've been overshadowed by the Cubs. But that team was insane. That team had Frank Thomas, it had Paul Konerko, Mark Burley, all great players. Scott Podsednik, Aaron Rowland, all solid players for the team. And then we get to the last piece. After a few disappointing seasons, the 2008 White Sox won the AL Central, but they fell to the Cinderella Tampa Bay Rays, who went. And then afterwards, the White Sox kind of languished in the American League Central for more than a decade. But then in 2020, they finally got their first playoff appearance since 2008, as they won the American League Central during the COVID-shortened season, but they fell to the Oakland Athletics in the playoffs, which is kind of unfortunate. Which is really unfortunate for the franchise. Now, speaking of which, now we gotta talk about the White Sox iconic players. The first one is Ed Walsh, one of the best pitchers of the 1900s. And despite his ridiculous numbers, he posted some stupid numbers. Ed Walsh injuries really hampered his career, but let's talk about some of the ridiculous stuff he did. In his career, he had a 195 and 126 record. He had a 1.282 ERA. No, this isn't actually his single season. No, this is Ed Walsh's career ERA, the lowest in Major League history. He was the 1908 MLB wins leader. He was twice the American League ERA leader and twice Major League Baseball strikeout leader. But there's something ridiculous about him. He's one of only 2 post-1901 players to win 40 or more games in a single season, and he's the last pitcher to do so. And he was also the last pitcher to throw more than 400 innings in a regular season. To put this in perspective, back in the day, there wasn't any relievers or closers. Pitchers were supposed to pitch complete games, game in and out, pitch all 9 innings, and that also includes extra innings too, which is actually insane. You don't see those kind of pitching stats anymore. But Ed Walsh was a fantastic pitcher. The next one is Luke Appling, one of the most iconic White Sox players of all time. However, he had one of the most interesting nicknames. He was nicknamed Oat, Aches, and Pains, due to the fact he constantly nagged over his injuries. But Luke Appling was a really good hitter. He was a .310 hitter, over 2,700 hits, and 116 RBIs during his 20 seasons with the franchise. He was a 7-time All-Star, a 2-time American League batting champion, and upon his retirement, he was the all-time leader for most games played by a Major League shortstop. Despite the fact he only hit 45 home runs in that career, his most famous home run actually occurred during the 1982 All-Timers game, as he hit one off of Warren Spahn at the ripe young age of 75 years old. Yes, that actually happened. The next player I want to mention on my list is going to be Nellie Fox, one of the best second basemen in Major League history. He's played for the Major Leagues from 1947 to 65, and he was known for his solid contact and his stellar defense. Nellie Fox hit .288 in his long career, 2,662 hits, 35 home runs. I mean, to be fair, you didn't want your second baseman to hit home runs at the time. You wanted him to hit for average, and you wanted him to play defense. He was a 15-time All-Star for the White Sox, the 1959 American League MVP, and he was 3 times the Gold Glove winner, and he was the first ever to win it at second base. And the fun fact is that his number was retired. His number 2 was retired on May 1st, 1976. He was the second of 10 White Sox players to have his number retired. As well, the next player is Luis Aparicio. Now, I think he's one of the greatest shortstops in Major League history. And I think he's one of the greatest to ever play shortstop. From 1956, he was played mostly for the White Sox, and his defense was exceptional, and he was an amazing base stealer too. He had over 2,600 hits, but his most notable was his 506 stolen bases. He was a 13-time All-Star, the 1956 AL Rookie of the Year, and he was a 9-time Gold Glove winner, and a 9-time American League stolen base leader. And fun fact is that Luis Aparicio was the first native of Venezuela to be inducted to the National Baseball Hall of Fame, as he was inducted in 1984. His defense was excellent, his offense was great, he could just do everything you could have wanted out of Major League shortstop. Next one, Mr. White Sox. Or in the Cuban Comet, Minnie Minoso, who's one of the most interesting players in Major League history. He played as a part of the New York Cubans, in the Black Baseball Leagues. Eventually, he became the first Black Cuban to enter Major League Baseball back in 1949 for the Cleveland Guardians, who are going to be named next year. And he joined the White Sox back in 1951 as its first black player. He was one of the most popular and dynamic White Sox players ever. He was a .299 hitter with 2,110 hits, 195 home runs, and 1,093 RBIs. He was a 9-time Major League All-Star, a 3-time Gold Glove winner, and a 3-time American League stolen base leader. He provided pop and power to a team that really relied on speed and defense, which was one of his greatest strengths. He also he was a 2-time All-Star in a 1947 Negro League Championship in the Black Baseball Leagues. And the fun fact is that he is actually the third player in Major League history to get a hit after the age of 50. And he was the second player ever to appear in the Major Leagues in 5 decades. Basically, he appeared in the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and yes, the 80s. And here's how he did that. So, Bill Veeck, the owner of the White Sox at the time, actually signed Minoso to do publicity stunts. And apparently, that's how he managed to play in the Major Leagues for 5 decades. Apparently, this thing is the biggest thing that keeps Manny Minoso off the Hall of Fame, apparently. Which makes no sense, as Minoso is one of the most underappreciated players in Major League history. We got 2 more White Sox players to go down. The first one is Carlton Fisk. Now, known as the Commander, Carlton Fisk was one of the best catchers in Major League history. He played 24 seasons behind the plate for the Red Sox and White Sox, and at the time of his retirement, he's held the most home runs all-time by a catcher with 351. But that's been broken by Mets legend Mike Piazza. In his 24 seasons, he was a .269 hitter, 351 homers, 2,356 hits, and 1,330 RBIs. He was an 11-time All-Star, the 1972 AL Rookie of the Year, and the Gold Glove winner that year, and he was 3 times the Silver Slugger. And one of Carlton Fisk's most iconic moments occurred in the 1975 World Series. And apparently, at Fenway Park, he managed to hit the ball fair during the left field wall. And it led to one of the most iconic calls in Major League history. And one more White Sox legend, the most recent Hall of Famer for the White Sox, Frank Thomas, the Big Hurt. One of the greatest nicknames of all time, the Big Hurt. He was one of the most feared sluggers of the 1990s and 2000s. He is one of the few Major League stars at the time to not fall under suspicion of the performance-enhanced drug controversies of the late 90s. Which is rare because other players, like Frank Palmeiro and other players were under that, and Sammy Sosa and McGwire, but he was never one of them, ironically. In fact, he was an advocate for drug testing. Which, hey, I mean, that's a good thing. He was a .301 hitter. He had 2,468 hits, 521 home runs, and 1,074 RBIs. This man was a 5-time All-Star for the White Sox, twice was the American League MVP, a 4-time Silver Slugger, and the 1997 batting champion. In fact, he was the only player in Major League history to have 7 straight seasons with at least a .300 batting average, a 100 runs batted in, 100 runs scored, 100 walks, and 20 home runs at least, which is ridiculous. Frank Thomas in his prime was one of the best hitters in baseball. You did not want to mess with Frank Thomas. And you wonder why he's been called the Big Hurt. Now we're approaching Michigan City. So I want to go ahead and do some, so we're in Michigan City. So we're finally here. So I do want to tell you guys that next week, sometime this upcoming week, we're going to have the Major League Baseball Field of Dreams game. And that's actually where we're going to be going next week, is we're going to take off near the Field of Dreams movie site. There, because Major League Baseball, it's to honor the movie Field of Dreams. And here's Michigan City down below. That's actually photogrammetry in the sim. We're going to go ahead and try to do a water landing. So we're going to put the flaps. We're going to try and do a water landing right outside of Michigan City. Look at that. That is cool. That is cool. Now we're going to go ahead and take off again. This here is the Indiana Dunes State Park. Absolutely beautiful to fly here in Lake Michigan. So I want to ask you guys, how have your weekend all been? I've had a good weekend so far. I did Allison Johnson's flight yesterday from from Istanbul to Aleppo, which is in Syria. So I took the early part of the flight with the Savage Cub, but I eventually had to switch to the Husky because the Husky handled much better in the higher altitudes due to it being more powerful. But I want to give a shout out to Allison. She's a wonderful person, and she's actually going to be on today on CDL's What the Flock, which is a trivia show question. And I'm hoping that we might get a chance to rate his channel, depending on how late we finish this, or how early. Now for our next stop, I want to talk about where we're going to go for our next stop. Our next stop will actually be in Gary, Indiana. Now, Gary's changed a lot as of now as it was back then. It is the 9th largest city in Indiana, and it was named after lawyer Albert Henry Gray, who was one of the founding chairmen of the United States Steel Corporation, headquartered here in Gary. It was once a proper steel town. Back during the Gold era, it was a very prosperous town and was incredibly diverse as a city. However, once the population, due to the overseas competition and restructuring of the industry back in the 60s and 70s, the white population of Gary fled, and due to all the population loss and the loss of business, Gary completely fell. In fact, there are parts of Gary that are completely abandoned as of now. It's a real shame, though, because it's a real shame all this had to happen to Gary. And it's now not really a safe city to be in. But it's definitely very notable, as it's the birthplace of the Jackson family. Most notably, Michael Jackson, the king of pop, is born here in Gary. Also, in addition, Alex Karras is born here, an NFL legend. And finally, Frank Borman was actually born here. And basically, Frank Borman was one of the astronauts, one of the 24 astronauts to fly around the moon. and he's actually currently the oldest living former American astronaut. And he's from Gary as well. So definitely something to keep an eye on as well. Hey, Martel, you're back. Hey, so we're heading to Gary now. How far am I from Gary? Well, according to my nav map, I'm actually right next to it. I'm around 12 miles away from Gary. Now, let me pull this up. So right in front of me to my left, this is where the U.S. Steel Corporation has been working on, right outside of Gary. This is Burns Harbor, and this is where the United States Steel Corporation is working their Midwest plant. In fact, their plants are around all over Gary, Indiana. So that's where I'm at right now. That's an impressive plant. I know. That's where they made a lot of the steel back then. It was made here in Gary. Now, as for runways, let me pull this up. So for runways, we will be landing on runway 30. That's where we're going to be landing there as well. Yep, it's a very impressive plant. Definitely very, very nice. I struggle with the trim of the Cessna 172 since the updates. Well, about the trim. So back before Sim Update 5, there was a thing called trim delay. So when you trust the trim, there was a bit of a delay before all the action. And I think because of it, it was easier to trim because there was a delay. Well, now they actually removed it. And do that, it's going to be a bit harder to trim, but I don't think it's that difficult to find the trim. But that's just me. That's from what I've noticed, Martel. But good question, actually. I want to trim the two joystick buttons even if I press the shortest one. It pitches about 7 degrees. I got that. Usually all the time I fly the Cessna 172s with autopilot usually. That's when I usually fly the Cessna 172. I don't usually fly without the autopilot. There's the runway 30. I'm going to go ahead and lower the power for a bit. This is downtown Gary in front of me. Have you locked the trim to your keyboard? No, I actually have it on my joystick, the TCA Side Stick Airbus. It's on one of the joystick buttons on the Airbus. Now I'm going to visit the Gary Central Railcats. They are the independent baseball team here in Gary. My only other complaint with the Husky is I wish we would have got all the other liveries. I wish they could have gave the other liveries to all the other variants. I think that would have been perfect. But I mean, I'm very happy with the plane. It sounds good, it flies well, and it comes with all the other variants, which is just great. This is the kind of bush plane I want to get. Well, in real life, you can get one for around like $350,000, but I don't have that money. Deploy the landing gear. Second stage of flaps. Money makes the world go round, I know. Yep, it does. There are many people who deny that, but that's the truth. Money does make the world go round, absolutely. I would go for a PPL if I had that money. I know. Private pilot license? Yeah. Mm-mm. And that's it. Over here is even more expensive than the United States. So, what do you mean over here, Martel? I know you live outside the U.S. Oh. I mean, do you live somewhere in the UK, probably? Or in Europe? Oh, you're from Germany. Okay. Yeah. I guess that makes sense. Europe's got a lot more regulations and stuff than the United States does. So I guess that kind of makes sense now. So, I guess this is going to be pretty good. I'm just going to wait till Martel gets down. I'll probably get back to the and load for the next flight plan. Oh, that is very smooth landing. Oh, yeah, that is a really smooth landing. That's great. That's awesome. Oh, yeah, you got that one perfectly. That's a perfect two-wheel landing. That's perfect. That was perfect. Awesome. Now I'm gonna go ahead and get this plane stopped, and I'll load in for the next leg of the flight plan. Back to the main menu once again. Now, there's an old saying here: even a blind hand will find a grain from time to time. Yeah, I've heard it. Yep, I think a similar saying is like even a broken clock is right twice a day. It's like that sort of thing. Yep, I've heard that's a very similar saying I've heard. Oh no. Why is my sim stopped? Oh, I had a CTD. Thankfully, this is intermission, so I don't really have to worry about it. Well, actually, but if it's a good time to get a CTD, it's during the intermission. I'm waiting for this to get loaded. So, during that time, I'm going to go ahead and upload the Last of Us slideshow. So, where we're going to be going for the next stop, we're going to be heading to Chicago, which is the largest city in Illinois, and it's actually the third largest city in the country. Only two bigger, New York and Los Angeles are the only two cities larger than Chicago. It was in orbit as a city back in 1837, near ports between the Great Lakes and the Mississippi watershed, and it grew rapidly in the mid 19th century. One of the things that really grew Chicago to be such a major city was the Union Stockyards. And this transported and refrigeration of meat completely revolutionized how American consumers eat their food and such. It made Chicago a massive railroad hub, probably the largest railroad hub in the country. Now, Chicago has got a ton of landmarks, but not limited to the Willis Tower, Wrigley Field, the Shedd Aquarium, the Cloud Gate, which is the strange ball structure, Soldier Field, and the Statue of the Republic. All notable landmarks in Chicago. Now, some of the most notable Chicagoans that I can list, but not including Walt Disney himself, the one who founded the Walt Disney Corporation and is a major hub for entertainment, who now also own Marvel, The Simpsons, Fox, Star Wars. Yeah, that's his company. George Halas, the legendary coach and owner of the Chicago Bears, which is Chicago's #1 sports team. And Robin Williams, the beloved comedic actor, the voice of the genie from Aladdin, voice of Jumanji, and many other iconic films voiced by Robin Williams. There are plenty of other legendary people from Chicago, but those are some of the ones that I've listed so far. But Chicago has got tons of iconic people. Now, the two fun facts I can list for Chicago, some of the nicknames for the city include the Windy City, which is the most famous nickname, Chi-Town, and the Great American City, as it's one of the truly great American cities of all time. Now, also, Chicago set a record for tourism, as 58 million tourists visit the city in 2018, which is a lot of tourists. A lot of tourists actually make their visits to Chicago. Now, there's a couple things I want to talk about. First is Comiskey Park. Now, Comiskey Park was opened back in 1910 for the Chicago White Sox. And currently, it was the home for the team until 1990. It has a seating capacity of 40,000 spectators, and it was built by the owner, Charles Comiskey himself actually built it. From his own group of workers, built the stadium all by himself. The outfield dimensions are 347 in left field, 382 at left center field, 409 at center field, 382 at right center, and 347. Basically symmetrical dimensions. Now, some of the most unique things about the ballpark is the exploding scoreboard, and a picnic area and double deck seating. The former two were actually brought in by former White Sox owner Bill Veeck. The exploding scoreboard was such an iconic feature at Comiskey Park, it was actually brought over to their new ballpark. Now, notable events at old Comiskey Park include Major League Baseball's first All-Star game back in 1933, the legendary 1937 heavyweight boxing match between Joe Louis and James J. Braddock, and the most infamous event at the park was actually Disco Demolition Night. Most infamously was Disco Demolition Night. So basically, for those who don't know what Disco Demolition Night is that it was actually a promotion back on July 12th, 1979. It was actually organized by Steve Dahl of radio, and this was the reason behind this was because back in the 70s, disco was the most popular music genre in the United States. However, there was a lot of backlash at the time by fans of rock music. In fact, it was so present that one of the organizers wanted to replace rock. So he campaigned for the promotion on the doubleheader. So what they decided to do was that fans were allowed to bring in disco records, and people actually brought their own disco records during the demolition. So the White Sox were hoping for a crowd of 20,000. However, that never happened. Instead, 50,000 people attended the stadium, including tens of thousands of his adherents packed the stadium. Many of the records were not collected from the staff, but instead were thrown like flying disc. And Dahl blew up over thousands of collected records. And apparently during that, thousands of fans stormed the field. And in fact, it took riot police to break up the whole thing. Due to this, and the reaction was so bad they had to forfeit the game. Apparently the incident was so bad they forfeited the entire game. In fact, Disco Demolition Night's most impactful significance to all this is the fact it completely hastened the demise of disco. Yes, that actually happened. But yeah, this was the most infamous chapter in the history of Comiskey Park. The next one is Guaranteed Rate Field. Now, Guaranteed Rate Field is the new ballpark. It opened as Comiskey Park 2, then it became U.S. Cellular Field, and it is now Guaranteed Rate Field. It's the home of the White Sox since 1990. It has a seating capacity of 40,000 people. And the outfield dimensions, for the most part, are symmetrical, except that right field line is actually 5 feet deeper. Like old Comiskey Park, they brought back the exploding scoreboard, but it also has a 2-tiered fan deck and, uniquely, a shower, which was a carryover from the old ballpark, because it's one of Bill Veeck's crazy things. Some of the notable events at the park include the 2005 World Series, Mark Buehrle's perfect game back in 2009, and the 2003 Major League All-Star Game have been held at Guaranteed Rate Field. But the most interesting fun fact I can think of is that it's appeared in films such as the film Rookie of the Year and Little Big League. And finally, the last ballpark, and the most iconic ballpark of all the ones we're visiting today, Wrigley Field. Now, Wrigley Field is the oldest ballpark in the National League. It was opened back in 1916. It has a seating capacity of 41,000 spectators, and the outfield dimensions are 355 in left field, 368 at left center, 400 center field, 368 right center, and 353 right. Basically near symmetrical dimensions, except for... Let me go ahead and do something. There. Now, there are many iconic features at Wrigley Field that really set it from a lot of the other ballparks in the major leagues during the time. Some of them include the famous ivy on the outfield walls, the old hand-turned scoreboard at center field, the only one still left, and the iconic marquee in the entrance. Now, for the marquee, let me go back to this. This here is the legendary marquee. Right here is the iconic marquee. That is the famous marquee that's in Wrigley Field. That is the thing at the ballpark greeting fans every single time they visit Wrigley. It is iconic to say the least. On top of this as well, there have also been other features too. In 2015, they actually installed new score video boards in the two outfields. Also, beyond the outfield walls, there's actually rooftop seating, which is the only Major League ballpark to actually have rooftop seating, and you can actually view from some of the tops of the rooftops as well. There's a lot of iconic features at the park. Some of the most notable events include Babe Ruth's called shot in the 1932 World Series, the Ryne Sandberg game back in 1984, the Steve Bartman incident, that's very infamous, and the 2016 World Series as well. But the most interesting thing about Wrigley is the fact this was the last stadium of non-expansion or relocated teams to have their lights installed. In fact, the first night game of Wrigley took all the way to 1988. Every other ballpark happened in the 40s. But the Wrigley was the only stadium to have lights. And the only reason they did was because Major League Baseball forced the Cubs to actually adopt lights. So that is definitely something to keep. So I think that's it. I think that's everything for the slideshow. So we're definitely going to go through Chicago for a bit. We're going to be on the south side. We'll be heading to Guaranteed Rate Field first. Then I'm planning to actually do a water landing. We're going to land outside of Northerly Island Park. This is actually where the old Meeks Field was at. I would have loved to visit Wrigley. Wrigley is such an iconic ballpark. I'm hoping to get to Wrigley one day. The only Major League ballparks that I visited were Cincinnati's Great American Ballpark. That's where I did my first episode of the series. And Tropicana Field when I was down in St. Petersburg. Those are the only two Major League ballparks I got the privilege of visiting. I want to visit more. I only had 2 days in Chicago. I know Chicago's such a memorable city. I know Chicago's a very big city, and it's still one of the nicer big cities. It's got a lot of character to it. Also, in addition, from what I also know, Chicago's not just home to the Cubs and White Sox, but it's home to the Bears. They play American football. It's also home to the National Basketball Association's Chicago Bulls, the team where the goat Michael Jordan played basketball, and the Chicago Blackhawks hockey team, ice hockey team plays here in Chicago as well. It's now overcast, but I mean, to be fair, it's called the Windy City. After all, there's a bit of overcast. But yeah, there's a lot of things to do in Chicago. Bit. There's Jackson Park. Yeah, it's a big contrast to LA. Chicago was busier. Yeah, Chicago's been really busy. It makes sense though. Chicago has one of the world's largest airports. Um, at Chicago O'Hare. Chicago's got tons of international airports. Chicago Midway, Chicago O'Hare. We're gonna land Chicago Executive, and there's also Chicago Rockford as well. Lots of airports around Chicago. The cars are honking a lot like in Germany. I bet. Wait, are usually the cars honking in Germany French drivers? I know the French have a notorious reputation for rough driving. Here's our first ballpark. Guarantee Rate Field is right below us. I'm gonna. It said LA people do not honk because they get fear getting shot. Yeah, and LA is kind of notorious. There's Guarantee Rate Field down below us. I'm gonna go ahead and pause for a bit. Go into Act Pause. I'm gonna go ahead and fly this drone down to get a closer look at the stadium. Now, at the time, this is called U.S. Cellular Field. So you can see right here, there is the fan porch up there. There's a fan deck area. It covered it quite nicely. There's all the billboards. There's the Exploding scoreboard right in center field. There's the Exploding scoreboard. There's the batter's eye. Now, up there. Looks kind of nice itself. It looks pretty good in the sim. Now, if you want to know where the old Comiskey Park was at, it's right around here. because it's turned to a parking lot for the new park. So that's where old Comiskey Field was at. It's now a parking lot for the new stadium. So definitely something to keep an eye out. Sometimes I like to pause to get a greater view of the ballpark. Now we'll be heading to Soldier Field itself. I'm going to go ahead and try and do a water landing. Activate the flaps. And I'll do a water takedown pretty soon. Gears up, good. Now I should try and find a good, safe way I can land this thing. It is. It's still amazing. I know some people say it isn't nearly as good as it was pre-update, but I mean it's still great. And the good thing about the performance group is I can actually now run more advanced graphics settings without hurting my frames, which is really, really nice. Now, I'm landing where Meeks Field used to stand, right in front of me. Back in the older flight sims, Meeks Field was used as an actual airport. So I made a waterside landing. On the Commodore. Oops. So this here is downtown Chicago. This is the legendary Soldier Field. So down below is actually right here is the original structure for the stadium, but that's since been changed. So they built this on top of this. It's one of the craziest things they've done at Soldier Field. The detail looks really good. And this area here is where Meeks Field used to stand all those years ago, before it was turned to a park. And there's still a lot of aviators not happy with what happened back in 2003. But I'm gonna go ahead and see if I can get out of this predicament. I'm gonna slew. Let's see if we can get out of here. It's like Roman architecture. I know, that's what they actually made Soldier Field out of. Yep, it's like Roman architecture. There's the famous Shed Aquarium. Down to our left. That's the world famous aquarium. To our left, this big tower, that is the Willis Tower. Right there to our left. One of the most iconic parts of the Chicago skyline. Yeah, they did a great job handling Chicago, and I mean, let me pull this up. On my screen, look at this. I'm getting a solid 30 frames. I'm getting like 31, 35 frames in Chicago on Ultra. Mind you, back then, it didn't used to be this good. Like, I'm blessed, and there's the Chicago River to my left. Yeah, absolutely gorgeous. It's great to take a float plane like this over throughout Chicago. It is absolutely wonderful. It's beautiful out here. It's a bit of an overcast. But I'm going to do scattered clouds. I think it's something more appropriate. Look at that. That's just amazing. There's Lincoln Park Zoo ahead of us. Now we're going to head to our second to last waypoint for the entire flight. We'll be heading to, we're going to head to Wrigley Field, which is located in Wrigleyville, on the Wrigleyville neighborhood. And there is the iconic Wrigley Field down below us. So I'm going to go ahead and pause this and get back to the drone. Let's investigate a bit about Wrigley Field, shall we? So this is the legendary Wrigley Field down right below us. So if we get down to ground level, we can see the marquee. Now, right here is the famous ivy on the walls. So this actually happened in 1937. The owner, Bill Wrigley, actually wanted to renovate and re-up the place. So he actually brought in, originally he brought in English ivy. But it turns out they later changed it to Boston ivy. So it can endure the harsh Chicago weather. And in fact, the ivy is so iconic that it even been grandfathered into the rules to prevent padding on the wall. And there's even unique ground rules related to the ivy, which, if the ball ever gets stuck in the ivy, it's ruled a ground rule double. Also, in addition, if you notice right here, that's right in this area, this is the rooftop seating. And that way spectators can actually get a unique view from the top of these rooftops. You can find them in both left field and right field. You can find rooftop seating in Wrigley Field, which is extremely unique from all the ballparks in Major League Baseball. And there's that hand-turned scoreboard in center field. And usually after games, the Cubs wave a flag on top of that scoreboard for wins and losses. So yeah, this is Wrigley Field, guys. One of the most iconic and beloved ballparks in Major League history. How cool is that? I know, it's really cool. Wrigley's really cool. It's a very unique ballpark. It has tons of character. It's a pretty amazing ballpark. And there's USA APR one. Thank you for coming. Nice to see you in the air as well. Yeah, it is amazing. Wrigley Field is incredible. It's such a nice ballpark. Well, it turns out we're going to go a bit further forward. We're going to be flying to Northwestern University in Evanston. Even though this is a baseball related stream, I want to go over to Evanston. And speaking about Wrigley rooftops, let me give you. Let me show you what these rooftop views look like. I got the website up here. So this is at Wayland Avenue, one of the streets. This is the view you get on the rooftop. Are the Cubs more popular than the White Sox? Yes, they're considerably more popular than the White Sox. Yeah, that's correct, Martel. But yeah, this is what the views are. I mean, that is kind of a unique seat to watch a baseball game, isn't it? It's very cool that's a unique view of the game. Well, this is Northwestern University to our lower left. This is one of the prestigious universities in the Big Ten Athletic Conference, and they're one of the great research universities in the country. But yeah, that's a great question there, Martel. It's the same thing with the Yankees and the Mets, and the same thing for the Dodgers and Angels. Whatever a team is more popular is the team that's historically been more successful is popular. And the Cubs historically has been the more popular franchise. Probably due to the fact the Cubs were the first team in Chicago. There's Ryan Field. This is the football stadium home to the Northwestern University. 30,000 people. Right down here. And we're going to finally land. We're going to land straight in runway 30 at Chicago Executive. And that will conclude this series, this episode. This will finally conclude it. The runway should not be far. Yeah, I mean, what a great flight. I know we had issues beginning the stream, but everything else for the rest of it has been really good. I'm very happy about how things went. Chicago Executive should not be very far at all. Gonna go ahead and power down. I'm gonna go ahead and pull flaps, just in case, to prepare for landing. But yeah, I've been absolutely loving the Husky. It's quickly become one of my favorite planes in the whole sim. Just, I bought a little picture figure as a souvenir. Ah, cool. Yeah, basically they're bobbleheads. Basically, the figurines are baseball in Chicago. There's the runway straight ahead, so I'm going to go ahead and get ready. Runway? We're going to pull my nav map. Good question. We're going to be landing on runway 30 at Kilo Papa Whiskey Kilo. We're going to be landing there for today. So there we go. There you go. There you go. I'm down. There. Take off the flaps. And that should be about it. We should wait to Martel and USA APR. We're going to wait for them to land. And then I think after this, I think we're going to find some. I think we're going to find someone pretty good to raid today. There's Martel. Look at this. King of Sparta is a nickname. That's pretty funny. A lot of these are Xbox nicknames too, but yeah, there's so many. Nice. That's pretty smooth. Yeah, this here is Chicago Executive. This is where a lot of the executives go on their business jets and land right here in this airport. USA USA PR1. I think he's about to land too. There is US ABR with the X-Cub floats. That's a beautiful float plane. Love the X-Cub. I'm used to flying the X-Cub after being part of Bush League Legends in their X-Cubs, so I'm very knowledgeable when it comes to. Just remember to land with the bottom tip first when playing the landing one of the float planes. And nicely done there, USA APR. Beautiful. So guys, this is the end of our journey here today. I know we had a technical issue earlier in the day, but I wanted to thank the USAPR and Martel for staying there for the whole time. Thank you for helping me work out all the issues. I really appreciate it. So next week, we will be heading to Milwaukee, Wisconsin. We're going to check out the home of the Brewers. And we're actually going to start somewhere pretty unique to start out. Without the stream, I would have never tried out the X-Cub. I thought it would be worse. Yeah, I think it's good to try out new planes, and that's something I've been doing every stream, Martel, is always try to find out new planes and learn how to fly each of them. That way we can try and have fun with different kinds of planes. So, I think we're going to find someone pretty nice to raid. I think we're going to raid B-Mint for today. So I think we're going to raid her channel for a bit. So have a good day for everyone, and see you next time.
Well, this is also very grainy.